Good evening, everyone. Before we get started, just to remind everyone, if you haven't done so already, could you mute your phones and notice where the fire exits are if you haven't already. A very warm welcome to our third annual RGS event, which is organized by Lewa Wildlife. I'm Joe Dreyer, and I chair Lewa Wildlife UK. Before we get started and turn this over to our tremendous panel here, I'd just like to convey that these events are designed to encourage thought leadership in the conservation sector, as well as to provide a forum between interconnected and various organizations which we have here today. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to our first speaker, Wanjiku Kinuthia, who is Head of Communications at Lewa Wildlife, Kenya.
Thank you, Joe, for that great introduction. As you said, my name is Wanjiku Kinuthia. I'm from the Lewa Wildlife Conservancy in Kenya, and I head our communications efforts there. And I'll introduce the rest of the panel. We have Ian Lemayan, our rhino scientist. We have Tanya, who's the project lead, wildlife cybercrime from IFO. And we have Mark, the executive vice president of Rakuten. Great. So thank you all for joining us tonight as we speak about this highly relevant and timely topic. And as I said earlier, my name is Wanjiku. I joined Lewa 7 years ago from Nairobi. Being a city girl, coming out of the city and going into our wildlife areas was quite the shift. But for the past 7 years, there's some key things that I've learned, especially working in communications and particularly social media. And I'll just speak briefly about Lewa. Lewa is a wildlife conservancy based at the foothills of Mount Kenya. We protect endangered species such as the Grevy's zebra that's on the screen, black rhinos, lions, giraffes, and a spectrum of other wildlife species. And what makes our approach unique is the realization that conservation can only be truly successful if it involves people, if people also benefit and derive day-to-day benefits, such as healthcare, water, education, through our conservation efforts. And my role at Lewa is to bring these messages to life and make sure that people understand the impact of the work that we are doing. And so tonight, we'll first start by describing social media. What do we understand social media to be? And often, social media is described as websites and computer technologies that allow people to communicate and share content quickly, to create messages and do it in real time. And when we think of social media, we often think of the very obvious ones, such as Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, but there are so many social channels across the world. And it's estimated by 2021 we'll have at least 5 billion active monthly users on social media. If we think of that as a country, that's going to be the largest country in the world. And the impacts that we've witnessed within Lewa are tremendous. And I'm going to touch briefly on some of these tonight. And the first one being conservation optimism. When I first started at Lewa about 7 years ago, the majority of the messages that we would see online were messages of doom and gloom and of dead elephants, dead rhinos, this sense of urgency that African wildlife was disappearing. Yet, when I got on the ground and saw the work that was being done, I realized that wasn't entirely true. There was a narrative that was missing, and this narrative was a narrative of hope, and most importantly, optimism. And through our social media channels, this is something that we try to demonstrate, that it's not just doom and gloom for wildlife. For example, this rhino on the screen, YY, she's absolutely stunning. Ian and I love to photograph her, as do so many other people who visited Lewa. YY is about 25 years old. She's had 7 calves. They've all survived to adulthood. And when people come to Lewa and see rhinos like her, and when we share these messages of her story online, it creates that sense of optimism that it's actually possible to protect and care for endangered species. And I'm happy to say that for the past 6 years, we haven't lost any rhinos to poaching on Lewa. And when we see rhinos like YY surviving to adulthood, and the majority of the rhinos that we've lost have died from natural deaths, then those are messages that we feel that we must share online, and social media provides the perfect platform for that. The second impact that we've had is humanizing conservation. When you look at traditional media, most of the times conservation appears to exist in a vacuum. In vast wilderness areas, there's minimal interaction with people. But when you get on the ground and realize that actually there are so many people whose lives are impacted daily by conservation through various ways. For example, at Lewa, we run various programs that impact, the people, as I had said earlier, because conservation has to matter to them. And one of the programs that's quite inspiring is the adult literacy program. And the woman on the screen, she was 90 years old when she decided she needed to learn how to read and write. She sadly died last week. Her name was Chebelina Mukomuga, and she never had a chance to go to school. We estimated she was 90 years old. And by the end of it all, it took a few years, but by the end of it all, she could write her name and perform basic maths. And this is a woman who's interacted and lived next to wildlife all her life. But through the adult literacy program, wildlife meant more to her than just the tourism it brings to Kenya, and these are messages that we love to share on our platforms for people to understand that beyond just beautiful wildlife, beautiful landscapes, there are other people whose day-to-day lives are impacted by conservation, and positively at that. Another impact that we've witnessed is the incredible reach that social media enables our neighbors, especially the communities that live in remote areas, to have access to. In remote parts of Kenya, people don't have TVs, they don't have access to newspapers, but through social media now, because the cell phone technology in Kenya is really strong and we have good network, these young warriors have mobile phones. As you can see, they're taking pictures of the rhinos they'd seen for the first time and sharing that immediately with their friends back at home. This is something that we have not been able to do before. The type of reach and access and real-time information sharing that's enabled by social media has not been accessible in the past. And so it's not just impacting us from this side of the world, but also to people who live next to wildlife and who have been cut out from traditional media in the past. Another impact that we've seen is a created sense of purpose on social media, and clearly stating and insisting that the protection of endangered species, particularly of African species, is not just an African problem. Through social media, we're able to engage people and let them understand that it's a global imperative. This is a global trade. It just doesn't happen in Africa. There's China, there's Hong Kong. There are trade routes through various countries, and there are ways that we can all have positive impact. Whether it's writing to our governments to appeal for them to do the right thing, to enact laws that stop the trade. There are various ways that we can do that. And one example I like to give is that if the African elephant disappears on our continent, it's not just us who lose the elephant, it's the entire world that loses the elephants. And that's a message that we try to reinforce on social media. And the last impact I'm going to talk about is tangible results. This is our team, our digital literacy team, receiving an award we recently won from Google that was accompanied by a 250,000 cash to scale the program. And we won this through social media. We won in the People's Vote Award, where we got the majority of the votes in thousands, and this is because we've engaged our social followers. We've made them create their micro environments where they support us, and they fully understand the impact of the work that we are doing, and they take it upon themselves to support us. And it was remarkable that we got the most votes, and there were so many organizations trying to get that award, and it was great for us. And I'm now going to introduce Ian. Ian is he's one of the youngest members of the team. We like to joke that he's a millennial who actually uses social media to do good. And he's going to talk about his personal journey on social media and how he's used it to tell his story and share wildlife conservation messages. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Wanjiku. Wow. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ian Lemayan. I'm Lewa's rhino scientist, and that young boy you're seeing there is me. And you'd be wondering, what is that little boy doing there from Kajiado, rural Kenya, and how did he get into conservation? First of all, I'd like to say that my mom really loved wildlife. She was one of the people that really got me interested in conservation, interested in wildlife, by taking me to the orphanage. Every time that I would go to the orphanage, the only thing that I would really want to see are rhinos, the lions, and everything else. One thing very curious was the rhinos are very big and they are eating grass. So I also wanted to go into the Kenya Wildlife Service bus. Every time I used to go to the stage, the KWS staff would have a different bus from the normal people. And this big bus having an elephant on the side of it would come, and every time I'd want to hitchhike with it, but not possible, because it was getting them to work. And I really wanted to be there. I really wanted to spend time with wildlife and be with wildlife. And that, for many kids in Africa or Kenya, or in the part that I come from in Kajiado, wildlife doesn't have very positive stories because we interact with wildlife. And being a pastoralist, looking at cattle, grazing goats, there's lions, there's hyena, and there's other predators that take them sometimes. But I was trying to make a positive story for conservation. So I went to school and graduated, went to Kenya Wildlife Service Training Institute, did environmental management, and then volunteered to Kenya Wildlife Service as a volunteer doing environmental impact assessment. So for 6 months and a half, I did looking at EIA reports, looking whether they were good to go or not good to go. But after 7 months, I was thinking to myself, I think I like just kind of like working with the wildlife more. Looking at pages of papers and looking at how Nairobi is growing, I don't think that's what really I wanted to do. So I went to the office of a friend of mine working for the vet department. And lucky enough, they were going to have an ear notching exercise, which is, they do that to identify the rhinos, because every species, individual counts. So he told me, come on Monday at 6 a.m. in the morning, and we can go and you can take part in notching rhinos. To my surprise, I was like, 6 a.m. in the morning, and I'm working from 8:30. Why are we going up so early? It turns out rhinos are really early animals, and you really need to wake up early. We did the rhinos. We notched the rhinos, and to my surprise, the rangers there knew the specific animal by name. They knew the relationships, mother and calf, and possible dad. And I was like astonished, like, why are these people concentrating so much on this animal? We have helicopters coming to dart the rhino, and then once it goes down, there's water for cooling the animal, and then making the notches quickly and easy for release. Until I read the history about rhinos, how much they've been poached, how much they're under threat, I came to understand that rhinos are not just endangered species, but they're very special animals and have emotions and feelings like you and I do. So the next step was to start looking for a job that actually makes a difference for me. And luckily, I got a letter from Lewa Wildlife Conservancy, which confirmed that we have an open position for a rhino scientist. If you're interested, apply, and then you can come and work for us. Happiest day of my life. You can imagine coming from Nairobi, where we were sitting in traffic and all you're seeing is red lights at the back of someone's car in public transport, and then to this. So This was my first day when I took this picture, but I posted it a bit later. My job, I go around with a motorbike on the Conservancy. And my job is to kind of like go taking pictures of animals, monitoring, keeping the rhino database updated, and making sure that all the individuals that we have are known, named, and can be positively identified. This is not such a bad life to live because you have elephants as traffic and sometimes rhinos as traffic. Good to have. Comes to my next thing. I was using, as research, we always want to find out what are these rhinos doing and how best can we improve their condition and how best can we protect them. We use camera traps, we use citizen scientists, we use research students, and I'm happy, so happy that some of them are here tonight. We use people who've been at Lewa to identify these animals, and we use our security team to make sure that we're monitoring these species. This is one of the videos from our camera traps that we got, and I can tell you this was the last image or video that we took. Well, I'm glad she said hi and made sure that you've seen who's done it before she did that. Now we have a suspect. So this is Samia, one of the famous rhinos that we have on Lewa. She's a lovely rhino. She's one of the best breeding rhinos that we have. And with information such as this, which is provided for security and also provided for research, we were able to identify that rhinos can actually see infrared or could smell human scent from a very long distance. We'd put food, or during the drought season, sometimes we do feed the rhinos to make sure that their body condition doesn't go down. We'd put food 2 kilometers from where this camera was. And through smelling and coming to the exact point, we were able to identify that rhinos do have a good sense of smell, but their eyesight is not good. Because you can see they still wanted to come and have a look at the RGS. I was talking about notching, what it takes. That is me there with our team. We first draw the notches right on the ear. It's just like a piercing, an ear piercing that you have. This is used to identify the rhinos. The rhinos are coded, each one of them counts, and each one of them has a different pattern. We use this to make sure that we have the right individual at the right time, and we're able to monitor them wherever they are. And those are some of the things that I actually post on my social media page group so that people can be able to understand. So this is also one of our famous rhinos called Elvis. Elvis was a hand-raised rhino, and he has quite a character. And those who've been at Lewa in this team have heard about him, and often I know you have maybe even seen him coming to the offices to say hi. He comes from a mother, a very good breeding mother, who was blind. Mawingu had what you call like an ocular disorder, and she could not see. She was born like that. So each time that she would give calves, she could not protect them or remember where they were. So we take them, we hand raise them, and we're able to release them successfully into the wild. And that is one of the things that we do as a conservancy, trying to make sure that each individual survives. FYI, you should not come close to rhinos like that when you come in the wild. This one is a tamed one, and he likes having a bit of a cuddle, just like a puppy or a cat back at home. So with this post, I was also trying to make a connection with people, connecting them with wildlife. Because if you love something, you'd want to protect it. If you feel very positively about something, you'd want to spend more time with it. And if at all I can be posting this and people give positive feedback, like the people you're seeing there, giving positive feedback and wanting to come to Lewa, having achieved that, that's one of my really good goals that I would want to achieve in the future. Okay. What has social media done for me so far? Personally, it's taken me to greater heights. Initially, I really wanted to be in conservation, do something for wildlife, do something that is recognizable and something that somebody can cap up and say, like, hey, you're doing a really good job. Being a rhino scientist was the best opportunity that I could ever have, but also flying for conservation and trying to take care of rhinos, protecting them from poachers from the air is one of the best things I realized that I could ever do for conservation, directly for the rhinos. How does flying and conservation relate, you might ask? So where we work, it's a 62,000 acre land. Combined with Borana, it becomes about 95,000. It's a big area to cover on foot. We have rangers who do that, but also it's good to have an aircraft in the air. And how you manage that is you do surprise flybys in the air when people least expect it. Whether day or night, it is possible and it is done. How did I get into flying? Social media, that's where now it came into work. I was thinking, now, how many goats and cows do I need to sell to actually get a private pilot's license? I don't have any goats, and I have 2 cows at home, and I couldn't. So I did a GoFundMe page, and I posted it on my Instagram. This was in 2017, early 2017. And as soon as I posted it on Instagram, I was now confident that it might take a year or 2 to now start getting some funds to go to school. But to my surprise, it took me about 26 minutes to get a response from a friend of mine who I'd never met from India. And she wrote me and told me, please put that down. My husband and I will take care of your PPL as long as you'll dedicate it to flying for conservation. And I did. So I was like, is this real? It can't be real. In India? Who is in India? So I was like, okay. We went on and planned for a Skype talk. And after we did the Skype talk, I was ready to go to the next move. Give them my school details, where I wanted to go to school, and they paid it, and I was able to go to school and become a pilot. Soon after that, my very good friend, Michael Nicholson, who is now head of Kenya Wildlife Service Air Wing, came down and trained me on a Super Cub. The Super Cub is one of the best aerial survey aeroplanes in Africa. And even I bet you've even heard of it in Alaska. People fly very slow and low, using them to protect animals everywhere in Africa. He converted me to that, and now I both fly for Lewa and also take care of the rhinos as a pilot. So my ending note, I would like to urge everybody here, and also the 5 billion people that are going to use social media or even read this, is please, in a world full of false news or fake news, it's good to stay authentic, to stay on topic, and to stay well-informed and provide a balanced voice, either for what we stand for, either it's wildlife, if it's people, and if it's the environment. Let's all be positive and do something great with the power that we have with social media. Thank you very much. So, thank you. Introduce Tanya. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's a tough act to follow. Ian, I'm available for job swaps anytime. But thank you, Lewa, for hosting this event. Thank you to RGS for having us, and thank you to all of you for attending. I'm now going to take you, I'm Tanya McRae-Steele. I work for the International Fund for Animal Welfare, and my role is to coordinate our work tackling global wildlife cybercrime. I4 is a conservation and animal welfare organization. We work in over 40 countries around the world, and we've been looking at wildlife cybercrime since 2004. Let me get my nice infographic up. We've been looking at wildlife cybercrime since 2004. We've investigated this problem in over 25 countries. And it's really, really encouraging, actually, for me to see these guys all here using social media for good, because I'm afraid I'm going to bring some pretty heavy-hitting facts about how it's not always used in the interest of animals. So how many of you have had the opportunities to see some of our wildlife actually out in the field, in the wild? Oh, wow. This is a lucky group of people. How many of you have seen it for sale online? No? Okay, yeah, so a mixed response on that front. Well, we've been looking year in, year out, and we find tens of thousands of live animals and their body parts available for sale over the internet. And here's some of our specific results. Oh, no. Okay, we're going to fast track to our recent, to our most recent report called Disrupt Wildlife Cybercrime that looked at 4 countries in Europe, if you include Russia as being part of Europe. And here are the results that we found.
As the online landscape becomes increasingly more complex, so does illegal wildlife trade. Over the last 14 years, IFA has worked together with technology companies and enforcement agencies to disrupt wildlife trafficking online. To help our partners and consumers focus their efforts in the fight against wildlife cybercrime, IFA produced an in-depth report. Conducted over 6 weeks in 2017, IFA researched more than 100 online marketplaces and social media platforms. In the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Russia. What stood out in the data is the striking difference between the trade in live animals versus trade in animal parts and products, and that a significant percentage of the specimens found were reptiles, especially turtles and tortoises. The immediate goal is to collectively make online marketplaces and social media platforms a no-go zone for wildlife traffickers. Data contained in this report provides further evidence of the urgent need to permanently end wildlife crime.
Okay, and there you see that what we do is we don't just gather this information, but we also share it with social media platforms, online marketplaces, and with enforcers for further research. I'm going to go see if this, here we go. So this is some research that we did back in 2014 from a report called Wanted Dead or Alive. And we looked at only 16 countries over a period of only 6 weeks. And in that time, we found over 30,000 live animals and their body parts available for sale. A third of those results were for ivory sales online. We have made some progress in seeing a dip in ivory sales across some platforms, so there is some good news in this presentation, but still you can see that the scale is vast. In this report, this was the first time that we really started to turn our attention to social media platforms. We were finding that the vast majority of trade was taking place on online marketplaces. That's like the likes of eBay, Amazon, Etsy, etc. Companies who we are now working with to really solve the problem. But we did start to see a shift in China where we'd really shut down the online marketplaces, and we were like, where have all those people gone? So we followed them, and we saw that they'd moved to WeChat. And when we published this report, Tencent, who own WeChat, got on board with helping being part of the solution to the problem. So I've talked to you about numbers, but what are we finding online? And it's pretty much everything and anything that you can think of. I've mentioned that we found large amounts of ivory for sale online and people trying to avoid detection using code words. We've also found rhino horn, tiger products, skins from various big cats, but shockingly live big cats, lions, tigers, cheetahs, other animals like that offered for sale, also primates. Both, sadly, their body parts, but also live primates. I even found an advert for a toilet-trained gorilla offered for sale in Russia. So really, there's a huge amount of products available out there. There's anything that you can think of. There's some things that I'm sure you can't even think of. And it's all available just at the tap of a smartphone or a swipe of a smartphone. So here are some more statistics, but also to bring this to life, when we're looking at the impact that an individual can have, there was just one case alone here in the UK where enforcers did a raid of a property, and this person had literally floor-to-ceiling, wall-to-wall animal body parts. So when people say, oh, it's just one trader, what difference can that make? Well, actually, it can make a vast difference. So it's critical that we work with our enforcers to make sure that there's a strong deterrent for those individuals engaging in this trade. So the growth of the internet, it's a place that's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's just constantly available, and we're seeing that it's having an impact on traffickers, and that people are shifting from physical marketplaces to online marketplaces. They're more, they've got the anonymity that they won't have if they're trading in person, and the chances of detection are lower. So and also this is making it faster and easier for poachers to connect directly with consumers. Essentially, it's turning lots of people into wildlife traffickers rather than just a few who have the capacity in the network. And another shocking piece of information is that we are getting reports in that animals are being caught and killed to supply this online demand. So this isn't people clearing out their attics and finding something from many moons ago and selling it. There is actually that component of the online demand is fueling and contributing to the poaching. Although we need to do more work to get a better picture of that. So it's really essential that we act now in order to make sure that we protect the animals' welfare and provide them with the security and the opportunity to survive in the wild for generations to come. If we don't act now, thousands of other wild animals are going to be at risk. There's going to be a little bit of call to action later for you guys. Okay. I should address one other thing, which is the dark net. The dark net is the hidden part of the internet that you have to go through sort of more complex means to access. And about only 1 million people are using the dark net right now. And there were reports that wildlife cybercrime was migrating onto the dark net. I4 partnered with Interpol to see whether that was the case. And we found hardly evidence any evidence that is the case. But we need to continue to be vigilant and make sure that if we do shut down all the other marketplaces, we have to be ready to tackle the dark net. So here's some good news. What are the solutions? At I4, we worked to create a network to defeat a criminal network. And the way that we did that is we launched our Global Wildlife Cybercrime Action Plan at the Illegal Wildlife Trade Conference in London this past October. And this brings together governments, enforcers, the private sector, NGOs and academics to make sure that we all work together to solve this problem so that we're not sort of sitting in our silos and working independently. And what's really promising is we're seeing this approach cascade down to the national level. We're seeing this happen in the UK and in Kenya as well, which is great news. So what else are we doing about it? We're coming up to the year anniversary of the launch of the Coalition to End Wildlife Trafficking. This is a coalition convened by I4, WWF and Traffic, where we specifically target the private sector. We target those online marketplaces, those social media platforms, and the big search engines, and bring them all together so we can establish a community of best practice. And they can become part of the solution. They can act as our eyes and ears on this issue. We are aiming for an 80% reduction by the end of year 2020, so we're going big and being ambitious on this. We have over 20 companies that have signed up to the coalition. Those include Tencent that own WeChat and Facebook and Instagram. And we're already seeing some results coming through. So with the Disrupt Wildlife Cybercrime report, I shared that information with Facebook and Instagram, and they removed all the posts that we identified. WeChat have been working with us since the other report I mentioned, Wanted Dead or Alive, back in 2015, and they've actually blocked over 5,800 user accounts that were trafficking in wildlife. So there is room for hope. There is more to be done. And eBay, who we're mindful isn't a social media platform, but is a good example for the other companies, in 2 years alone removed over 100,000 wildlife posts. So my call to action for all of you in this room is we need more people being our eyes and ears. We try and check the internet as much as we can, but we can't be everywhere all of the time. So if there's one thing that you do after today's talk, if you go away and look on your smartphones or look on your laptops or your iPads and you see wildlife products, there are facilities to report that directly to the companies. The companies really hear that. They will really respond to that, and they'll see not only that they have to respond to that individual post, but it also incentivizes them to continue to be committed to this issue because it's something that you as their customers and their users care about. Okay, and now I'm going to hand over to Mark. As I've been speaking about companies, I've known Mark for I think maybe 2 or 3 years now. And Mark has been an inspiration to me. Mark works for Rakuten and has been exactly one of those many people that we work within the private sector that is a real force for good and ensures that that we're getting companies and individuals on board with the reason why we need to tackle this, why it's critical, why we need to act fast, we need to act now, and we need to have the resources to win this fight. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Great introduction. I've never been introduced like that before, but thank you. Can I, before I speak, just say what an honor it is to be invited to speak here. Thank you very much indeed, Lewa, and to follow such a fantastic group of speakers. You all, tonight, we've been talking about this topic for many weeks now, but I am still learning and still being inspired by what you say, so thank you very much indeed. So, Rakuten, why are we here today? Why am I here today? A little bit about me and the company. Rakuten is a large international technology company with digital platforms all over the world. We're headquartered in Tokyo, but we've got social media platforms, we've got marketplaces, we've got content platforms. We've got an enormous amount of technology and an enormous amount of people that use them. And because of that, we've got an enormous, I believe, responsibility to take part in not only this issue, but any other issue, but be it environmental, social, and governance, to ensure that we're playing the role that we can. And I was delighted when I first met Tanya many years ago in our efforts to understand our role, to learn exactly what we could do and work with NGOs just like I4 to make that very clear. So I'm going to start with some insights about the journey that we've been on. I'm then going to talk a little bit about a case study of how social media itself not only can be used to stop things bad happening, but can be used in a positive way to embrace the positive attitudes that there are within organizations here, but also the optimism of consumers and people around the world. It started for me several years ago. I took on this role as head of sustainability, and I wanted to understand exactly what there is that we can do. And it took a great deal of engagement. The stakeholders within and without the company, we needed to speak to understand exactly the role that we could play. And the first step we took was to align all our strategies, all our operations, to the UN Sustainability Development Goals that were launched in 2016. And these are now published online, and we try and live to those as much as we can. And I think that's a starting point, a very beginning point, that any company, particularly one like ours, needs a first step that you need to take in order to understand the role that you play. More specifically, in 2017, with a great deal of help from Tanya and other organizations, we were able to engage with the leaders of the organization across the board and announce in 2017 an ivory ban on all our platforms globally. It was a big step for us. We know that across Asia there are many markets for ivory and other animal products. So we were making a stand, particularly in Japan. And so this was a big step for us, but it was only the very beginning, and it needs to be the very beginning. But it's, as I said, not just about stopping things happening that is important for companies like ours. It's using social media to make advances, to make positive change. And I'm going to give you an example now of how we partnered with the WWF with a platform that we call Viber. Some of you may have heard it's a messaging platform, just like WhatsApp, a little better, if you ask me. But it's how WWF partnered with Viber for positive environmental change. So the goal of this partnership in 2017 was to work on Earth Day and World Elephant Day to create awareness of the issues, to engage people in the wonderful stories that our biosphere offer us, and make sure that we got people the information they need to make good decisions every day. And there were 3 core social media tools that we used. The first was this thing called a chatbot. It's relatively new technology, not too new, but it essentially allows you to automate mass communication at a one-to-one level. You have people signing up to the bot, we give them some quiz questions, they answer, we give them some information, they vote A, B, or C, they get involved, they share, and it's a way very quickly, at scale, to get masses of information to masses of people on very, very low budgets. Chatbots are a very popular tool in social media, and you'll see them because of machine learning these days is everywhere. You'll see this more and more. You're actually interacting with a machine, which sounds scary, but in this context, it's a very effective way to use social media to get messages out to millions of people. So that's a chatbot. That's the first. The second was online communities. People joined the community, and we were able to one-to-many broadcast the kind of messages that WWF wanted. Here's information about your oceans, about your ecosystems that you care about, the animals that you care about, and people could take part in the conversation. Millions of people took part. The third tool was stickers. Now, this is what Viber is particularly proud of and famous for those that know it, and this is why it's fun. Let's remember that, as my colleagues here said earlier, this isn't a bad news story. There's a dark side to this story, but wildlife is a wonderful thing to engage with. And the charity sector has one of the most powerful set of stories to tell. And these stickers just made it fun. And everybody was able to engage, no matter the demographic, and they could download the stickers and use them to communicate with each other. You've all seen those stickers, the emoji types. But these were particularly popular. So altogether, 4 million people engaged with the bot and the communities. 8 million sticker packs were downloaded, and 60 million messages were sent using those stickers. Very cheap, very quick, very easy. WWF were able to use social media to enormous advantage, and we'll be doing this again and again and again. And it's just not just the likes of WWF. Those big organizations could harness this. Social media organizations work with all levels of charity to make sure that this kind of technology can be harnessed. So there's a case study. But what about the future? How do we make sure that in the coming weeks and months we engage with social media as organizations and individuals in order to make that positive impact that we're all looking for? 4 trends I want to talk about. Firstly, we've got scale. We've heard that by 2020, 5 billion people will be online. That's of a population, predicted population of 8.5 billion. More than half of the population of the world will be using social media over the next 10 years. This is an enormous opportunity, and it's a free opportunity. This is free social media. And not only is it free, the quality of the storytelling, which I'll talk about in a minute, is there, and it's within your power to use it. It's growing fast. Secondly, social as the foundation. The internet, actually, as it started, was a social tool. In 1991, when the World Wide Web was launched, it was about sharing information between academics. And that foundation of social, of sharing, still is there today and more prominent and more powerful. And it's more powerful and prominent because the technology has advanced so that we can curate our own stories. We can use video. Video is the most, as you all know in your own social media experiences, one of the most powerful tools in social media. And the conservation sector has some of the most powerful, engaging images, the most powerful, engaging stories to use. There's no wonder that cuddly kittens and squirrels are the most popular downloaded or viewed content on social media. You have the content. Use it to reach those millions of people. Now, it's not all positive. There are some things to be wary of. Many of you will be familiar with the echo chamber, or the bubble that we put ourselves in. Now, this is of our own doing. Social media tools allow us to like certain things and unlike certain things, and select one thing and unselect another, and define the content that we see. And the more we define the content we see, the more we curate what we see, the more limiting our view. The narrower our perspective, the reduced our understanding. And while this is useful in the sense that there is so much information out there, we actually start to lose perspective. And the more we get wrapped up in our own bubble, as we've seen in perhaps US and UK politics at the moment, the more entrenched in our views we become. And that's when it's not only dangerous, but you lose, in the case of the conservation sector, audiences. But we don't have to succumb to that. The tools are within our hands to adjust that. We need to step out of our bubbles. We need to go and look for alternative, different points of view. Speak to different groups, not just online, but offline too. And if we do that, we keep our perspective up and our understanding up. And if we have got a good perspective, we can influence. We are much more able to influence with a broader understanding and perspective. Stepping out of our bubble is critical. And in this case, when we've got so many powerful messages to get, we cannot stay in our bubble. It's actually quite small. We need to go beyond to reach the millions of audiences that we need to in order to get these messages across. The echo chamber is a dangerous thing, but we can very easily get out of it. My last point is really a bit of it's a call to action. If we want social media to have the positive impact that we desperately need it to have on the conservation world, we need to engage with it. And I mean that in terms of you as organizations, you as NGOs, you as individuals. And we need to engage with each other. That understanding that we get from listening to different perspectives in different bubbles is critical for us to influence the stakeholders we need to influence. That collaboration, as shown in the global coalition where Rakuten and other organizations have this wonderful opportunity to share ideas and get inspiration. That is the critical engagement point in order for us to make the changes we need to make. NGOs and consumers are incredibly powerful, more powerful than we know. But the social media will itself become more powerful and more persuasive. It will become pervasive. Both persuasive and pervasive. And if we are really to see the impact that we want to see, we must engage with it. And if we engage with it, the impact of social media on conservation, which is what we're all here for tonight, will be good. On behalf of all four of us, thank you very much indeed for listening.
I won't even say anything because that was too good to follow. It's just my job now to call on questions. We don't have you for that long tonight, so we can't answer everyone's questions. Thank you. But we would love to hear your thoughts or queries if there's anyone who's got any.
So I have a question.
Hold on one second, we'll get you a microphone. Just here.
I had a question for Mark. You described Rakuten as a global technology technology organization, and you describe the depth of technology that you have there. To the extent that you have technologies to identify or to block the advertising and the sale of illegal wildlife products. Are those things that you're able to share with other organizations without compromising either your own commercial priorities or the effectiveness of those technologies themselves?
Thank you. So yes, I think in a sense this is what the coalition is for. So I've met various organizations through Tanya, Google and Facebook and Etsy and eBay, etc. So we do share, at the very least, perspectives. Sometimes the technology just doesn't fit together. They are proprietary technologies that simply just don't fit in other people's systems. But the concepts behind them, the purposes of them, and maybe even the monitoring, enforcement, and strategy behind the technology itself can be shared if the technology itself can't be. But it's absolutely critical that we do, in a sense, open source some of the thinking around this. And that will make it, because if I just keep it in my garden, that's not really going to help anybody. But another example, it's not just the technology companies who provide the technology, it is the social media or the consumer technologies. There are other companies such as Vulcan, which is a company I know that Lewa works well. I think I was introduced to them through you guys. But they develop a lot of tech for good. So there's a lot of other organizations out there that are providing security, intelligence, all sorts of levels of technology to help ensure that we support the goal. And those technologies are being shared with our technology companies as well.
Anyone else? I think I was going to call Donna just here.
Oh, this one.
Sorry.
Thanks. I guess my question is probably for Tanya. I'm just wondering if you can tell us a bit more about how the Coalition to End Wildlife Trafficking Online is working in partnership with the different corporations to address sort of issues of online sales in sort of wildlife products.
Yeah, so we've been working with companies since 2008, but we've been working on a one-to-one basis, and we realized that we were having successes on an individual basis, but if we shut down one platform, the trafficking just migrated to another platform. So we had to take an approach that stopped that whack-a-mole effect, and that was bringing together this community and this collective sense of responsibility, and also a real opportunity to communicate more about the work that these companies are doing and how we are enabling them. So the nitty-gritty details are we start off by ensuring that the companies have wildlife-friendly policies in place, and we advise them on what those policies would look like. Then we work with them on creating an action plan, tangible steps that they're going to take to make sure that they implement those policies. Because we were seeing in some cases there was a lot of goodwill and it was resulting in the introduction of policies, but that there was a challenge implementing those policies. And we support those companies by telling them, which animals to look out for in different regions, what code words people might be using or other techniques that they're using to avoid detection. And then those companies report back to us about how many adverts they're removing or how many accounts they're blocking or where they're able to intercept our tip-offs and prevent the items resulting in a sale. We also realize that these companies can be that force for good and that they can educate their consumers. And people, particularly with the social media platforms, they have such a massive reach and they can tell such a huge story. So we provide them with the resources and information that they can communicate with their users and with their customers to understand actually that they might be unwittingly contributing to wildlife poaching. It might seem very far removed for them. As Mark said, we've got we bring this community of best practice together where we bring academics and companies together to identify artificial intelligence or data mining solutions so that this can become more automated. And we also have an ever-growing army of cyber spotters, so people who are enthusiastic about protecting wildlife but want to work with us to report these items to these companies and make sure that those posts are being removed.
Any more questions? The front row here.
I think this is a question for Wanjiku. The website for Lewa has recently been vastly improved and is extremely exciting. And congratulations. But it has struck me from time to time, you're posting animals up on the website. Does this not become a source for poachers to see the animals that there are at Lewa and an incentive for them to come and poach at Lewa?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's actually one of the biggest, one of the most major questions that we get online whenever we post rhino pictures and elephant pictures, that people say, are you not putting these animals in danger by posting and sharing their photos online? Especially when they have such spectacular horns as YY. Are you not, just leading poachers to their path? And my response usually, and our response as Lewa, is that this is true especially for Kenya, in that poachers don't need to go on social media or websites to know where the rhinos are. Poachers are part of a criminal syndicate. They're part of syndicates that are involved in human trafficking and the drugs trade, and they already know where the rhinos are found in Kenya. And they're not going to use social media for that. Whilst this may be true in other countries, it's not true in Kenya. And I'm a firm believer in that poachers shouldn't scare us in sharing the magnificence of wildlife, and showing pictures of how truly magnificent and beautiful wildlife is and why we must protect it.
That's a good answer. Any more questions? We don't have a ton of time, but we do. Just here.
I've got a question for Ian. I just want to understand what the biggest challenges are that you face in your job. I think it's often very easy to use social media to make life look idyllic all the time, but often that's not the case.
Thank you very much. It's what we post is usually the fun stuff, but behind the scenes there's a lot of challenges as well. Some of them is when we are having a rhino going missing for a couple of days, everybody's sweating that time. Everybody's working hard 24 hours thinking about where could he be, where could she be. And in other areas, rhinos can go missing for up to 6 months. This is not in Lewa. In Lewa, when it goes past 3 days not being sighted, we have groups to kind of start looking for the rhino. After 10 days, we have to start flying. We have to pull everybody into the area that they're supposed to be. And that is one of the most challenging situations that you can ever have. The other biggest challenge that comes is that, unfortunately, that's why sometimes I usually think like some of us are not real scientists, is because we fall in love with this animal so much that any loss of any rhino that we have or any animal that we have, they're like our brothers, they're like our sisters, and they're like our sons, they're like our daughters. And it's terrible for us. So those are some of the challenges that we have, and we don't post them out there, but they're real, they happen, and they're amazing animals, and we can never stop loving them. Thanks.
One more? At the back.
So this is for both of the Lewa guys. So we see in the news all the time about how bad the poaching crisis is in Africa. But tonight we heard that Lewa hasn't had a single rhino poached in 6 years. So why do you think Lewa's been more successful than other conservancies in this?
I would say that one of the biggest reasons why sorry, I have a slight cold. One of the biggest reasons why we've been successful is that we work very closely and in partnership with our neighboring communities. And as a result, then they become our first line of defense against poachers because they fully understand the value of protecting endangered species. They see the impact it has on their day-to-day lives, and they protect the animals as fiercely as we do. And by making sure that the people who live around us and beyond us and see the value of conservation and the work that we are doing, then they become our first line of defense, as I've said. They usually call our security team to say, oh, Lewa, you should be careful. There are these suspicious people, along your fence line, or I've heard this person in this town is now becoming a wildlife middleman, so please be careful. And so through that level of engagement and making sure that there's community buy-in, then we've been really successful. And the other factor that has led to our success is partnership. partnerships. We work very closely with the government, the Kenya Wildlife Service. We work closely with other law enforcement agencies to make sure that our efforts are not just within our boundary, but beyond our boundaries as well. And, you know, as I think Mark or Tanya mentioned, you know, you can't succeed in modern day conservation working in silos. You have to engage with your partners, and you have to work at a landscape level. And that has also led to our success. And what do you think?
Something to add is that we have a very strong monitoring protocol. Our rangers go for refresher training every year, and we have the critical sighting period for the animals that we have is very low compared to other areas, and also our security structure, our security format is also very good compared to any other areas. And this is all due to the support that we get from people like you and people from all over the world. Thanks.
I think we have to, if we're going to have time to draw the raffle, we have to call it there. But just on behalf of all of Lewa and IFA and Rakuten, thank you all so much for coming tonight.